Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox. Thanks for logging on. This is Versus. Today, a comparison long in the making and eagerly anticipated by yours truly. We have the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Perpetual Calendar Ultra Thin versus the Patek Philippe Nautilus Perpetual Calendar. This is the 5741G. So these watches are difficult to attain simultaneously, even in my business. So a chance to cross-compare will allow us to look at their dimensions, their fit, standout features relative to each other and their advantages, and then finally I'll pick my favorite from between the two. So let's get started. First things first, we'll talk about the Overseas since it's probably the less familiar of the two. This is the Overseas Perpetual Calendar Ultra Thin. There are several ultra thin references within the third generation Overseas family, and what they have in common is the use of the Vacheron 1120 base automatic. So what we have here is 41.5 millimeters in 5N red gold. That's the diameter. It's 8.3 millimeters thick. And as you can see, there's no protrusion of the end links from beyond the case. So the lug-to-lug dimension here of 49 millimeters really is the total distance across the wrist. We'll throw it on my wrist now. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference, and you'll get a good sense of the fit. As you can see, the watch is very broad, but also very flat. No issues fitting underneath the sleeve. It comes with two straps and a quick release lug system. One strap is blue leather, one strap is blue rubber. And of course, the watch is highly adjustable on the bracelet. No trouble fitting underneath the cuff. I'm going to say if your wrist is 15 centimeters circumference or larger, you're going to have no trouble wearing this watch. Taking a quick look at the bracelet, one of the standout features of the third generation Overseas is the quick release lug system. This makes the extra accessory straps more practical as you can fit them in an instant. It's also very easy to reassemble. It works like a car seat belt buckle. You simply snap it into place, and every single link of the bracelet on each side is removable, so you're going to get the right fit. You have a lot of fine-tuning potential. You can see that there's a 60% sized link in there as well, and you have two 1.5 millimeter pull-out sleeved micro adjustments, one on each side of the clasp. Now the clasp is a twin fold with a twin trigger, which means it closes like so, and once it's closed, it stays shut until you press both triggers to release it. You can see the Maltese cross motif recurring on this watch. It's the logo of the Vacheron brand. It recurs down the center of the bracelet. You can see the intricacy of the hand finishing the bracelet, not just the bevel on the side, the polish on the flank, the satin on the top, but the sharp finishing within the individual links. A lot of effort went into making this component. Now, taking a look at the case, it is quite slender. It's also a little bit less complex in its construction than the Nautilus. This does make it a little bit more economical to manufacture, though not by much. We have details like a satin-finished lug hood and case top. We have polished flanks, which have a little bit of a conical slope. There's a bevel that expands at the end of the lugs. Pusher adjusters. Both of these watches use conventional grand levier, that is wheel and lever-based perpetual calendar systems, and they have individual correctors that allow you to correct the calendar displays. Though this watch has a push-down crown, it's not one of the screw-down crown Overseas models. It's still rated at 50 meters, and it has an internal soft iron cage that runs around the perimeter of the movement, gives the watch 25,000 ampere per meter anti-magnetism. You can see there's a little round plinth underneath a bezel that is satin finished in its recesses and polished outboard, and that bezel again references the Maltese cross design. You can see it again on the crown and again applied in rose gold on the dial. Now the watch has lumen, it has plenty of it. It's not exceptionally bright. Neither of these watches is. And I'm going to show you a little bit later. You can decide which one you think is better lumed, but I believe it's the Vacheron due to the presence of more indices. All of the indices, the hands, they are rose gold. The idea is to prevent oxidation, tarnish, or discoloration over time. There's a flange outboard that is lacquered, and that is used to read the minutes. Then we have a center dial that is a lovely blue metallic with a translucent lacquer on top of a metallic base, and really is quite fetching. Taking a look at the sub-registers, each one features a matte blue finish. Then you have a crescent-style moon phase down at 6 o'clock. It is a perpetual calendar. It can deal with irregular length months and leap years, and it uses a 48-month display. So simultaneously, the month display is also the leap year phase display. So as you can see, we have January, 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 January. So what you're looking at is a dial that reads 48 months, and each quarter represents 1 year. The L represents the quantième bissextile, or leap year. It's easy to show you the back of this watch because, well, the bracelet comes off. Taking a quick look, you can see that it uses the 1120. This was originally developed for Patek, Vacheron, and AP in 1967. JLC developed it for them. It was a commission for those companies, only ever used by them. JLC never sold it to anyone else or used it in its own watches, and it is still quite beautiful. This is the same movement used in the original Nautilus 3700 Jumbo, the 1972 Royal Oak 5402, and Vacheron's own 1977 222 sports watch, so it has a lot of relevant heritage for this type of timepiece in this model family. You can see there's a 22 karat mass, not 21, not 18, God help us, not tungsten. It's finished with at least 4 different finishes, and you can see that it is beautifully decked out with a compass rose type design. We have a beryllium ring. You can sort of see it turning. It runs all the way around the movement. There are 4 ruby rollers that act as a base on which for this beryllium ring can pivot. So it pivots on those little ruby rollers, allowing it to be sunken very close to the base plate, and those ruby bearings ensure that the rotor cannot hit the bridges and that the ring cannot hit the base plate. That helps the base movement to be only 2.4 millimeters thick, and even with the modular perpetual calendar, the combination here, the 1120/3, it is still only 4.05 millimeters thick. We've got a free-sprung gyromax style balance. It's a 36 jewel movement. It's adjusted in 5 positions, which is the high horology and chronometer standard. Yes, it's Geneva hallmark. You see it on the movement, but you also see it on the watch. As since 2012, this has been a standard for the entire watch, not just the movement. It beats away at a vintagey 19,800 vibration per hour beat rate, and it has a 40-hour power reserve, but its hallmarks are its beauty, especially when finished to this degree, as well as its historical relevance and its significance through many important references from several important brands. So that's what you get from the Vacheron. We'll talk a little bit about the Patek now. This one actually debuted a little bit later, came out in 2019, so I know I seem to have contradicted myself, but the 3rd generation overseas came out in 2016. This watch came out in 2019. This perpetual calendar overseas came out in 2020. Now we're straight. Okay, the Nautilus. It is a very standard Nautilus in terms of feel and fit. White gold, in fact, this is what they call gray gold. It's a white that never needs to be rhodium plated. It's white all the way through. But the Nautilus 5741G is 40 millimeters in diameter. It's 8.8 millimeters thick. If you just measure the lug-to-lug dimension, then it's 44.3 millimeters across the wrist. And if you measure these little polished end links, the outermost outcropping, the rigid outcropping, creates a distance of 48.5 millimeters across the wrist. Very similar to the 49 millimeter size of the Vacheron case, but in my opinion, the Patek wears just a little bit better on a small wrist. I think you could wear this watch on a wrist of 13.5 centimeters circumference. It just seems to fit better on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist than the Vacheron did. They're both super thin. The Vacheron's thinner, but we're only talking 0.5 millimeter here, and the sloped case flank of the Patek means it'll never get hung up on a dress shirt sleeve. It's quite solid too. Although both of the watches are similar in size and mass, somehow the Patek Philippe in the hand feels more robust. Now, what you'll also note is that there's probably a better match between the size of the case, the width of the lugs, and then the taper of the bracelet on the Patek than you find on the Vacheron. It seems to me that the Vacheron bracelet, relative to the width of the case and the taper of the lugs, is just too narrow, and I think the Patek has a real edge in that regard. Now, moving through the Patek further, you can see there's a lot to love. The bracelet is nicely made, though it doesn't give you all the features of the Vacheron. Here you could see that the bracelet is still rigidly fixed to the case using a bar and sleeves, so you need a block and a punch to remove the bracelet from the case, and you need the same in order to size the bracelet. We have bars and sleeves here. They're called pins and sleeves. It's a system for sizing bracelets that you often see on older watches and lower priced watches. Patek once used screws, and then somewhere around 2011, 2012, they transitioned to this system. I like the old system better, but Patek will tell you that this is more secure, less likely to lead to disfigurement of the bracelet, and apparently less likely to back out than a screw, though I'm going to call BS on that and say this was just cost cutting. I prefer to see screws. Screws is how Vacheron and AP do it. Patek, raise your game. One thing that they did do, however, is they've upgraded the clasp compared to the standard 5711. So what we have here is a twin trigger double folding clasp. You see that little Calatrava cross when it's closed. It contrasts with the Maltese cross of the Vacheron. So instead of having a clamshell system to close the deploying clasp, here we have twin triggers. And so this is a much better clasp than what you would have gotten on a standard 5711. It's beautifully finished internally. You see these little components of the Calatrava cross. We have spring-loaded triggers for releasing it. It's just a much better clasp than what you find on the standard Nautilus. Now taking a look, you can see that this bracelet is probably, like the case, more intricate in design, assembly, and finishing than the Vacheron. You can see here we have a bezel that's satinated on its top, rounded along its edge, and polished. Then it has a vertical polished segment, top and bottom. Then, by the way, there are some fingerprints here. Don't mistake those for damage. They're just my fingerprints. Then we have this little sort of pincer system where the winglets cover each side of the case and then screws fix the winglets in place. So this watch with a screw-down crown has a 60-meter water resistance, which is 10 more than the Vacheron, but just as important, it uses a screw-down crown, making this watch surface swimmable, whereas I would not surface swim or swim the Vacheron in any regard. Also important, you can see that some of the bevels here are really quite fine. In particular, the bevel along the shoulders of the case wraps all the way around to the case back across the end of the lugs. There's a lot of subtlety here, including the finishing, the double polish, satin and polish of the winglets. So I think this case looks more expensive and likely is more expensive to make than the Vacherons. The dial is lovely. It's a metallic, sort of frosted metallic. It doesn't have a clear or obvious directional grain like a sunburst would. It has the lateral strakes that have long been a hallmark of the Nautilus. We have white gold hands, white gold indices. We'll do a loom shot right now. You'll take a good look at this. And you can see, in addition to being a different color than the Vacheron, it's missing a couple of indices, which makes it a little bit less intuitive to read. Let's do a double loom shot here just to be sure. But I believe that overall, the Vacheron is easier to read due to its multiplicity of indices. We'll zoom in a little bit. And again, I'm not really sure there's a clear-cut victor, but it's a lot easier for me to grasp this at a glance. There are some positions on the dial at 9, at 3, around 6 o'clock, where it might be a little bit more difficult to read the Nautilus. So while the Nautilus probably has more loom on its hands, the Vacheron has a more completely loomed dial. So on that basis, I think it's just a little bit better, but this is going to be a matter of individual preference and opinion. I don't think either of them carries away the title with ease. Now jumping back, we can see the dial includes a couple of sub-registers that are coaxial. We've got a moon phase and a pointer date. We've got a 24-hour gauge, so you know when not to use the pusher adjusters to set the calendar, and that's coaxial with the day. Right here we have a leap year phase indicator, and then we have 12 months. And it is important to note here we have two separate hands for those functions, one for the leap year, one for the months, so you don't wind up with this 48-month display that you see on the Vacheron. Some brands do that. I like this system better. Now the watch, of course, includes a 122-year moon phase. Well, the watch will have to go back to Patek to deal with a quirk of the Gregorian calendar in the year 2100. The moon phase displays on both of these watches are actually good to go for 122 years from the time they're set. Flipping this watch over, you can see it too uses a veteran movement, caliber 240, a micro rotor automatic that Patek first launched back in 1977. So we have a 22-karat micro rotor that pivots on ceramic bearings. We have the Patek Philippe seal, a free-sprung gyromax style balance, 6-position adjustment, and anti-magnetic silicon hairspring. 6 beats per second is the beat rate, that's 3 hertz. And Patek says that when you combine the Patek Philippe seal, the silicon hairspring, the gyromax balance, and the 6-position adjustment, the watch will run no worse than -3 plus 2 seconds per day. Vacheron makes no specific promise about precision, so it is nice to know that Patek is willing to put its money where its mouth is. Now, the movement's also far more visible than with the Vacheron. I can see everything because instead of having a center rotor and a winding bridge underneath that, like I do with the Vacheron, with the Patek, I have the micro rotor that effectively gives me all the convenience of an automatic, but with the open caseback vista of a manual wind. And although the Vacheron manages to be thinner, I think the Patek manages to be more beautiful, and all of the standards of finish are present and correct. Both movements include a little bit of mechanical finishing supplemented by a lot of hand finishing, and neither one of them is any kind of discredit to its manufacturer. Both of them are exactly what you would expect for the price. It's just going to come down to a matter of your preference between the aesthetic of the micro rotor and the tradition upheld by the 1120. So let's talk about the advantages each one has. The Patek, obviously there's that accuracy attestation, which is an impressive thing in high horology, as it seems the more expensive watches become, the less likely you are to see any kind of a chronometer certification or an accuracy promise. That tends to be the bound of Omega, Rolex, Breitling, but very rarely Holy Trinity. So I'm glad to see that -3 +2 second guarantee from Patek. It adds some substance to their claims of technological innovations. Now, the watch is also the power watch. Between the two, this is an icon, and I might even say it's a bit of a plutocratic icon. Whereas it might not have been a household name or commonly recognized 10 years ago, social media has definitely changed that. And alongside the likes of certain Rolex models and Richard Mille, a Patek Philippe Nautilus of any description really is kind of the status and stature standard for someone who wants to make a statement with one of these watches. That's not why I buy watches, but for a lot of people it is important, so I'm not going to discount it. Also, this is the one to buy new. New, it's $145,000, $480 as of early October 2022. Well, pre-owned, these go for between $250,000 and $300,000. So you can basically buy this watch, wear it for free for a couple of years, and then still make a profit on it. So if you are on the wait list and you have seniority, if the number comes up, definitely buy this one new. Also, easier to wear. Although the watches are very similar in size and almost identical across the wrist, this one, in a practical sense, really is more comfortable on a small wrist. So on that basis, if you're like me, it's the more logical choice. And if you're a lady, more logical still. The 24-hour subdial. Don't forget that what we have here is a little 24-hour indicator that lets you know whether it's, for example, closing in on 5 p.m. or 5 a.m. And this is important, because here you can see that little stub indicator means we're in the first half of the day. The Vacheron doesn't let you know if you are in the middle of the night. So you don't know if you're looking at, for example, 12 noon or 12 midnight. Well, you can break the watch if you try to use one of the push adjusters to set the calendar during the middle of the night danger zone. So having that 24-hour indicator on the Patek isn't just good for cave climbers who may not have access to sunlight. This is a very practical means of avoiding damage to your watch. Also, for me, the leap year solution here is superior to what you get on the Vacheron. The Vacheron can be a little bit difficult to read. 48 months on one subregister has inherent compromises in legibility. Here, it's much easier to read the current month as well as the current quartile of the leap year cycle. Also, better case bracelet integration. There's just no getting past the fact that this appears a little bit more fluid, whereas this appears jarring. Some folks won't mind, I do. I'll also say that the better view of the movement that you get with the Patek makes it more worthwhile to me as an haute horlogerie piece, because after all, seeing the movement is a big part of why you buy a watch like this. Now let's take a look at the Vacheron. The Vacheron by 0.5 millimeter is thinner, which is impressive considering it's not a micro rotor or a manual wind or a peripheral rotor. It is an old-fashioned case-back center rotor. It just has a very, very thin base automatic. It also has a base automatic with a lot of historical importance. And while both the 240 and the 1120 are historically relevant, this one has broader meaning for the watch industry as a whole, as it was that Patek, AP, and Vacheron movement back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Still a very important movement today and still used by Vacheron and AP. Also, there's a white gold option. If you want this watch to be a one-for-one alternative to the Patek, you can absolutely get this as a white gold model. You can also get skeleton dial versions of the rose gold and the white gold models. You don't have a skeleton dial option or a rose gold option with the Nautilus Perpetual calendar, so this gives you more choices. Also, it's the one to buy used. New, this watch costs $102,000. Used, you're going to pay between $160,000 and $170,000. That's a sizable premium, but compared to paying almost twice that for the Patek Philippe, the Vacheron makes a whole lot of sense. Better bracelet. Not only do we have the 2 accessory straps and an extra rose gold clasp to use with them. But we get this quick release system. Every single link is removable, and every single link is fixed by screws, not pin sleeves. Plus, we have that little 60% sized link, and we have these sleeved quick adjustments on both sides. So this is a fantastic bracelet. It holds its own against the Nautilus bracelet in terms of structural integrity and finishing, but then it goes above and beyond with some of these additional features that allow you to easily size or swap. What else is going on? Well, how about an 8-year warranty? Vacheron's standard warranty is 2 years, but they offer a 6-year extension. So if you're buying one of these new, let's say you're buying both of them new, the Vacheron might be worth buying new on that basis alone and paying the full $102,000. Also, if you're going to buy this watch used and it's previously had the warranty registered, you could buy it 2-3 years down the line and still get far more warranty remaining than the Patek brand new, which has only a 24-month warranty. So 8-year warranty, that's fantastic whether you're buying the watch new or used. Also important, I would say that it has narrowly better lume due to more and more legible indices. It's going to be a little bit contentious. Both these watches are similar, but I think the Vacheron overall is easier to read at a glance in the dark. Both of them have classic calibers. So which one do I like more? Well, you might be surprised to know that I actually like the Nautilus more. The Nautilus has a lot to recommend it. First, it's easier to wear. Second, the perpetual calendar system, thanks to the leap year display, is just a little bit more intuitive. I like having that 24-hour secondary dial. I like the fact that Patek puts its money where its mouth is and guarantees accuracy. I don't necessarily love the design of the Nautilus relative to the overseas, but I do love the integration of the bracelet, which is far and away superior. So all else equal, I'm probably going to pick the Patek, but if this were a matter of picking the best watch for the money, it would have to be the Vacheron. Guys, let me know if cost is a factor, and if cost is not a factor, which of these do you choose for yourself?